All right, joining us again to discuss is Distinguished University Professor at Touro College, Thane Rosenbaum, and constitutional law attorney Amir Benno. Gentlemen, I want to go right to something that President Biden stated, his statement following the ruling. Here's what he said. I am deeply disappointed by the Supreme Court's ruling in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen. Since 1911, the state of New York has required individuals who would like to carry a concealed weapon in public to show a need to do so for the purpose of self-defense and to acquire a license. More than a century later, the United States Supreme Court has chosen to strike down New York's long-established authority to protect its citizens. This ruling contradicts both common sense and the Constitution and should deeply trouble it all. Amir, you are a constitutional law attorney. Isn't the whole reason the Supreme Court overturned that rule is because it wasn't constitutional?
Yes, Biden is wrong. And if he's interested in going back 100 years, he should go back to when the Second Amendment was ratified or when the 14th Amendment was ratified. And 1791, 1868, respectively. And the court went through the statutes that existed in the various states and territories at those times and said there's not a history in our country, there's not a tradition of regulating public carry in such a way where beyond just showing a need for self-defense, which is all that the Second Amendment requires, that you have to go and show some sort of additional special need. It didn't exist. It was always unconstitutional. And what's interesting is that with constitutional rights and the Bill of Rights, if the government wants to intrude on them, the government bears the burden of justifying its actions. This regiment in New York flipped it on its head and said that citizens have to justify their right to exercise their Second Amendment. So they turned it upside down. It was always wrongheaded. It was always unconstitutional. Joe Biden is more interested in his policy grounds than on the law and in the Constitution, and he's upset because it's not consistent with his policy grounds, but their decision is entirely consistent with the Constitution.
By the way, other May issue states, California, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts, and New Jersey, in addition to New York. So we can expect, I mean, that's a big population of people right there, Thane. And you had mentioned you can still have reasonable laws or reasonable restrictions. Who decides what's reasonable? Because what they thought was reasonable before, the Supreme Court just said, no, that's not. That's unconstitutional. So who decides it?
Well, the state legislature will decide gun ownership and rights and privileges for both ownership inside and outside the home. The difference now is that the Supreme Court has finally spoken and has extended the rights beyond the home. And at this point, between the Heller case 10 years ago and this New York case about rights inside and outside the home concealed carrying, clearly the existence of a right, a constitutional right, exists. But as you've pointed out, Bob, that's not without restrictions. It's not without licensing requirements. That can still be extended. And remember, the states that you just mentioned, the problem here in what Amir said about the policy issues is that the Buffalo shooting is in New York State. And this law did not prevent that. Chicago has actually very stringent gun regulations. They have a political problem there. It's a very violent city. And so, too, is the state of California. So I think part of it, it's going to be much more difficult to say the Supreme Court overreached on the Second Amendment. What the Supreme Court finally did said, look, the Second Amendment means what it says. Up until recently, we just left it alone. And as Amir said, there is a rich history in this country, which is what Justice Thomas said, of gun ownership in America without restriction for self-defense purposes.
All right, Thane Rosenbaum and Amir Benno, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.